behind every investment, there isn't just logic and numbers. There is a story. There is a belief. We don't manage only money. We manage also the emotions we attach to it. My name is Catherine. Welcome to Sparrow Podcast. And joining me today is an old guest, Jared Ashmole. He is a financial advisor and he's here for a second episode, which is great. Hi, Jared. Thank you for joining me again for Sparrow Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you again here. How are you? How are things going?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Catherine. Good to be here again. All good on my side, to be fair. Getting a bit hotter now in Dubai, starting to heat up.
It is.
It is indeed. What about you? All good?
All good, yes. Kind of.
Kind of.
There is always a place for improvement, right?
Mm.
And actually, speaking of this, it's not a secret that we are navigating a very complex political environment at the moment.
Yeah.
And there are, of course, factors that are also influencing the financial markets. And the media, I feel like they put all these titles. They put all these titles that are kind of spreading panic most of the time. And I'm curious to know your take on this. How do you stay grounded and how you do not get pulled into this emotional sphere which the media is creating?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I try and stay away from social media and the media as much as possible from the perspective of viewing loads of material. Obviously I use it for myself, but for political events and stuff like that, it's almost good just to kind of zone in. And obviously, you need to know what's going on, right, from that perspective, but equally you have to try and look at things with a level head. When obviously the conflict started, I was in the UK, and then I was there for 4 weeks basically because my flights kept getting cancelled and pushed back. And watching kind of it coming from the UK, it's not the reality. So you have to almost just kind of ignore it because they were having all kinds of articles and videos coming out of there, which loads of people have raised, and I'm sure you've seen some, which are just in reality nothing like what's actually going on. So you kind of have to keep a level head and just look at the actual facts and the data.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of this, there are so many hidden factors that are influencing our financial decisions. What are some of the hidden emotions that are shaping our investment decisions?
Well, I think uncertainty is obviously one. If you look what's going on, right? So even if you have a global portfolio, okay, but you're in this region, you're still going to be very uncertain, right? Because you might have to move house, you might have to move job, dependent on circumstances and what's going on. So obviously uncertainty does impact people's financial decisions because when they know what they're doing, they know their work categorically, they can be very comfortable with saying, right, I need to think about retirement. I need to invest money and make it grow. But when they're uncertain, they become a bit more hesitant. And obviously things need a lot more kind of thought process. So I'd say uncertainty is a big one. And then I guess fear as well. So it kind of comes with uncertainty, but the fear of if I invest and, all this happens, what's going to happen to my money? And these are two things that obviously will drive markets, right? So when people are very cautious, ironically, markets can often have pulled back and that's why they're cautious. It's the best time for them to be going in, but psychologically they don't want to. But when they're very high, they've done, say, 10%, 20%, suddenly everyone wants to, jump in. But in reality, it's the other way around. So I'd say they're two big ones. The uncertainty and the fear factor are obviously driving people at the moment. And it's more the other way, more coming away from long-term plans and long-term decision-making because of that.
Okay. And what can we do in order to move away a bit from this uncertainty and fear? And you as a financial advisor, what is your role in this regard?
Well, I think to be fair, obviously it's experience that will move away from it because at the end of the day, when you've seen a few cycles, and this can be, it doesn't have to be someone in finance, but when you kind of understand, you know things will recover. And to be honest with you, not much has actually, if you actually look at markets compared to, it's not been a massive, like, it's not like they've dropped massively. There's been volatility in there, but in the grand scheme of things, they haven't. So it's experience. And then that's almost where we come in, like financial coaching. So for people who, say, have no idea what's going on, obviously they know the news, but they don't know how it impacts and what can happen. It's about taking the emotions away from decision making. So that's where, we can basically say, right, well, you should still be benefiting from dollar cost averaging, which would be investing every month. And they might say, well, hang on, but look, there could be uncertainty. But for a long-term strategy, it doesn't actually matter, right? Because you're building and you're contributing every single month. So you're really starting to kind of spread your entry points in. So for us, it's more, we come in from that perspective, more of like a coaching, and I want to say hold their hand. I don't know if that's the right kind of expression, but making sure they're not panicking or they're not getting too excited on the other end, and just sticking to kind of a consistent long-term mindset. If that answers the question.
It does, for sure.
Yeah.
And actually, that brings me to my next question, which is related to one of your LinkedIn posts, because I'm reading what you're posting.
That's good. I saw you like them.
I like them as well. I think I will get like a fan badge or something. Fan of the year. And one of these posts is mentioning that S&P was at the lowest for this year on the 30th of March, yet some days later, I think 18 days later, it hit an all-time high. And how does caution become a missed opportunity?
Interesting one, because it was the 30th of March, and we're not talking again a massive swing. We're looking at 8-9%, right, which is reasonable, but it's not talking like 30, 35 like what happened in COVID. But even then, right, so the 30th of March was the lowest, and the 18th of April or something like that, or maybe a bit before, was the highest. And ultimately, it's funny because when they were coming down, it was around the period of what was going on. In, the oil price was surging, obviously the landscape that's going on at the moment. And the thing that happens is when you're looking back on it, it's very easy to say, oh, well, I'd have bought there and made 8-9%. But then in the reality of the moment, to your point, the fear and the caution, you're thinking, oh, this could drag on a while. Like, this could happen and this can happen. You're not thinking, oh, that's the bottom. Because if it went to 20%, then suddenly, you've bought it at 9. Even though if you're sitting on cash and you look at the data, if you see a market, like a developed market or an S&P 500 down that percentage, it's arguably a good time to be easy money in, because why wouldn't you? You shouldn't really wait for the certainty, because once the certainties come, like it did, ceasefire and other oil price started to come down, then it's recovered and it's gone up, literally over 18 days. That money has effectively gone from here, come down and come back up. So it's really about that's what kind of drives people, because when they're scared and they're uncertain, they don't, although they say they'll do it, they don't. And that's the kind of conversation we have. Oh, I think I'm going to wait. I'm not sure how it's going on. Now, you said miss the opportunity. I can't predict what's going to happen. It could come further down, and then those people say, see, that's why I'm waiting. However, it might not, right? That might have been the dip we see for the next 2 to 3 years. And that's back to the point why generally you should be consistent and you should ignore the noise. The only reason you would take advantage of that is if you were sitting on more cash, right? And then you can go, oh, great, I wanted to invest. There's a discount in a market I was going into. Let's deploy. So that kind of gives, the thought process of what people are like, because it's very easy to look back on a graph and say, I'll buy here, sell here, buy here. But if everyone could do that, you wouldn't need anyone, right? We'd all just be doing that. So it's when they are down, emotions take control, like COVID. You'd be surprised. When I was advising, I was in the UK over COVID, and everyone was like, no, this is different. It's never coming back. It's never going to change. This is not the end, but almost the end. Exactly. Like, businesses are ruined forever. People can't go out. And literally it was about, because I know there's quantitative easing and other things that helped it, but 6 months, 7 months, shot back up. And the problem is that 6, 7 months, incentives, people are hearing about quantitative easing, people are hearing the solutions, and then suddenly they're like, oh yeah, I want to go in now. But they've not missed the opportunity, because even if you bought the top then, now you'd have a really nice gain, but you get the point. You know, you could have made even more if you were more aggressive on the way down and less aggressive when they'd recovered.
But you're speaking about COVID and people comparing these to other events.
Yeah.
And if we put this in perspective, like, do you think it's good to use historical data and events to assess a certain event in the present?
I think it's a good question. I mean, me personally, obviously every event is different, isn't it? And there's a lot of factors that go into it that is probably hard to predict, because you don't know everything, right? So it's very hard to say, well, look at this example, we'll look at that example. What you can do is obviously you can take, if you ignore almost what's going on, I mean, if you think about it, the best way almost to look at it is you take like the US market and you just ignore what's going on. You don't look at any of the events, any of history, 08, COVID, and you just like look at the data and say, oh, look, it's down this much, I'll buy. It's down this much, I'll buy. It's probably a better way to look at it. I think it's very hard to predict and say, look what's happening now and how does this compare 40 years ago to something that happened? Because obviously things will be very different, right? And they are, you know, so you can't really use events now and look at past events, because typically they're black swan events. So they're things that are, you know, that we couldn't predict. Like no one could have predicted what was going to happen here. If you asked, I'm sure if you asked, you know, 500,000 people, you know, is this scenario feasible? I don't think there'd been a single one who said yes. And that's the point. So it's like, it's very hard to like put an event to what's going to happen, but you can use past data to see when are good opportunities.
Okay. Building retirement savings, investing, paying off debt would mean that we usually have to give something out from today in order to hopefully gain something in the future. And sometimes that future can be even decades later.
Yeah.
Yet when we see like all these offers, or we see like something nice that we want to buy, like a gadget, or we want to go on a luxury trip, we are so tempted to use the money in order to do that. And what happens if we are focusing more on spending in the present moment rather than building wealth for the future? And in the same time, we also need to acknowledge that all we have is now. Like all we have is the present moment. So where is the balance between like enjoying a bit of life and also saving for the future or building wealth?
Yeah, it's a really good question, to be fair. And I think that's one of the common things that people are like, well, like, you know, I almost don't want to have, I want to spend my money now rather than have it when I'm 55, 60, 65. However, there's quite a lot of, I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but there's a lot of books that say this as well. The key thing is pay yourself first, right? Which is quite a simple saying, but ultimately you should do both. And I don't know, you know, without speaking to someone, we don't know their lifestyle, what their commitments are. Like you can have very wealthy people who actually earn not much at all. And you can have very poor people who have like, you know, high leased cars, their kids at private school. Although they earn 10 times the money, asset-wise, they're actually a lot less. So the pay yourself first point effectively means whatever you earn, right, you'd put away 5%, 10%, 20%, dependent on what you can start with and what you can build up to. Ultimately, you'd want to build up to around 20, I think, would be ideal of your salary going away every single month. Especially here, it's arguably a lot easier to do in the sense of there's no tax, right? I know in the UK and stuff, you have pensions and it comes off. So I guess that is also, you know, easy, but here there's no tax. So really you think of it like a tax, 20% to me, to my investments, to my future. And what that does is when you talk about people budgeting, it's actually very hard to do. Because if I said to you, you might like a coffee in the morning from Starbucks or from, I don't know, wherever you like to get coffee. Okay.
I actually don't drink coffee. I'm the weird one.
All right. Well,
So I'm actually saving, you see.
yeah, well, you're doing great then. But I mean, I like to have a coffee, right? And I've got, as bad as it sounds, like I don't like to make it either because I'm normally out. So I will always kind of buy it, which obviously isn't financially, say, the best decision. And I'm an advisor. However, in the pay yourself first model, right, I can spend the rest of my money on what I want. If I want to buy, you know, £500 of coffee, it might be a waste, okay? But I've already put away my 20% as an example. So it's then your decision to spend the rest on what you want. So you're not budgeting to the extent where you're saying you can't do that, I'm going to cut that back, because it generally doesn't work, because all that will happen is you'll start getting frustrated with yourself.
Exactly.
And you don't want to do it.
And however, it's even more tempting, right?
Exactly, because you're like, I shouldn't, but I want to. And by the way, I'm not saying I spend £500 coffee a month, just to clarify, but you get the point. If I've already put the 20% away, it doesn't really matter what I want to spend it on. It might be a waste to you, but I might really like what I'm buying. You know, you might, exactly your example, I don't even like coffee, but that's great. You spend it on what you want, and I'll spend it on what I want, but we've both put away 20. The issue comes where someone puts away 0 and then they're trying to budget. So then they're like, right, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to have that. And all that will happen is, if they're not paying themselves first, they'll end up resorting back to the old habits. So that's why it's really important, no matter what you're earning, what your job is, to try and get into that habit. And it's harder here because in the UK, you know, you're forced to do it. So it's harder here to actually acknowledge to do it. But then really, as you have no tax, it should be easier. So it's actually a bit of a opposite here, because in some ways it should be easier, but I find a lot of people actually find it harder to do in the first place, because you're not forced to do it. You know, when you're not told and forced to do something, you often are just like, I'll get around to it in, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 20 years. And then before you know it, you never started it.
And regarding this retirement scheme in UK, I'm just curious if you know, like if you live for a long time in UK and you contribute to that retirement scheme, at some point you're just moving to another country. What happens with what you've put on the side during all this time?
Yeah, so obviously when you're in the UK, there's two that you're talking about. One is personal pension, which would be like through workplace pension. I mean, like a kind of pension that you contribute to, you actively choose to, which is like your workplace and where you have to do your employer match. And then you have a state pension, which is where the government will pay the pension. Your pot is 57 for most people like our age, and the state pension is 68, 67. I can't remember the exact day, but it's a lot later. If you move abroad, it doesn't change the legislation. You still have that 57 on that pension pot. It just means that depending on where you are in the world, you can be subject to different tax rates. Okay, so in the UK, it's quite simple. You have 25 tax-free, 75 is taxable. At least when I was advising there, that was the situation. And then when you move it across, if you were to say go elsewhere and you're out for 5 years, the difference is obviously that part which is taxed. If you're here, for instance, and you've been here for long enough, then arguably it won't be, right? So it's no different to the actual legislation. It's more around how you take it, if that makes sense.
I think I got a bit lost, but it's on me.
No. Yeah, to be fair, that was quite a technical question that you went into. But long story short, I think what you're asking is,
do you have access to it or not if you move abroad?
No, not until the age. So very simply.
Until the age. But when you reach that certain age and you maybe lived for the last 20 years outside UK, do you have access to it?
Correct, yeah. So very simply, if you leave, it doesn't go anywhere. It's like an investment pot.
Okay.
So you don't lose it. You just essentially take it at 57. Some people think that, if I leave, I'll just take it all. But you can't do that. It will stay invested. So like as an example, if it was just in, say, a few like Vanguard funds or whatever it could be in, you would essentially take it at 57. you wouldn't be able to move it, but it would all stay invested. You don't lose the money. So yeah, because obviously it wouldn't make sense, right? If someone had worked in the UK their whole life and they retire abroad, they're not just going to lose a pot. Otherwise that would be, one of the biggest jokes going, and it would discourage people to save, because then they'd be thinking, well, if I leave, what's going to happen? So yeah, it's basically just like, think of it like an investment pot, but in a wrapper, like wrapped up into a pension. That's the best way to describe it.
Okay, thank you. Moving forward to our next topic, I would like to make a link actually between dopamine and finance.
Okay.
Because dopamine is making us chase the reward. And if an investor was like on a winning streak, it will get like hyped, right? To get into the next investment, and the gain needs to be higher, like the stake needs to be higher. In your view, is there a moment where we should say, okay, stop? Like, does greed needs to be controlled? Or do you think that greed is actually the engine that is fueling this financial system?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we spoke about it a bit earlier. It's back to the kind of emotions, isn't it? Like when...
Yes, exactly.
Like a good example is, so gold, I don't know if you track the price of gold much, but it was pretty flat for like years. Like when I started, like no one really spoke about it. Like people like it as like a hedge, like it's got its place in a portfolio, but it wasn't a talking point. Suddenly in the last year, the amount of people that have come to me and said, I want gold. Can we include gold, right? And then you think, back to the point, you'd be like, well, must have dropped in price. Everyone wants it. But no, if you look at the data, it actually gone up 300 or 400% in like a 5-6 year period. So everyone's now talking about it. But in reality, that's the greed, because they're getting FOMO. They're like, I don't want to miss out. What if it does another 400%? So I actually know people that sold of positions, not like particularly my clients, but sold of positions and bought gold when this all happened. Because typically it's a hedge against like economic uncertainty. That's what it's moved. We didn't do that because, if anything's gone up, in my opinion, that quickly, it's probably going to come back down. And that's not, an exact science, but it did, right? It dropped. Although everything that's going on, it's actually decreased in value, right? So again, for someone doing it long term, it doesn't really matter. Hold it for 15, 20 years, they'll be fine, probably. But it's that greed, right? Why is everyone talking about it? They should be actually talking about things that have suddenly, come back. And I think in a way though, the greed, I guess, is needed to an extent, like you said, because what it does do is it gets people thinking and it gets people investing, because that greed of wanting to make money, obviously you don't want to take excessive greed, because then you start getting really high risk and you might be putting all your money into like one stock and then it drops, and that the greed has ruined kind of maybe your life's work. But the greed to an extent is a good thing, because you're really starting to think about markets. And back to that example, COVID, even if you bought at the top because of greed in the standard market, it doesn't matter, because they've done really well since then, the top point. So I think it's needed to an extent, because it does get people thinking and wanting to do it. Because if they don't have that mindset, then they're probably not going to touch markets, are they, to an extent? But then it's like always having a bit of a balance. You need to be careful, like the gold example and the other things I gave you. I think greed with a long-term mindset is good. Greed with a short-term mindset is obviously bad, because you're just gambling and trying to like play stocks and work out what's going on. It's very hard to do.
Interesting point of view. And as per your experience, do you have often to like kind of like pull someone and say, hey, we need to stop here? Like
not as in like we need to stop, as in because we do more like portfolio based, right? So we're diversified. So we obviously have people that come to us with ideas, and then I would generally say, as an example, if someone, because we wouldn't advise, like say you need to buy this stock and this stock and this stock. So if someone's like to me, I really want to invest in Microsoft, right? We can give them an opinion, but then if they want to do it, they can go away and do it. They don't have to, we'll have like a portfolio that we'll manage for them, okay? And then, we'll take a very level kind of, head on it, where their risk profile, are they high, medium, low? What does that look like? And then we almost won't be impacted by things like this. But someone that's very, like on it and they like to make, almost big decisions, then yeah, we would say, well, like, look at the price. You sure you really want to do all that? And we can give like an opinion on it. So it happens, but I wouldn't say I have many people to the extent that are saying stuff like, I want to put my whole wealth into Bitcoin and things like that. It's more, people do it more with money they can afford to lose. And, if that's what they like to do, then there's not really an issue with that. If that's their kind of, as long as it's...
If it's their risk profile, right?
Or if it's a very small proportion of their wealth to what they're... Because if someone had, say we were managing like $1 million of someone's wealth, right? And then they had 5K that they like to pick individual stocks and, they can do all that if they enjoy that and they like it and they want to suddenly move it around. It's when people start doing it with the million. Do you see what I mean? And then there can be an issue. So it's all about, how much risk do they like to take and what do they have overall? And then you kind of know where they should be.
Mm-hmm. And I think greed is also fueling all these financial bubbles, which historically happened many times, right?
Yeah.
And the herd mentality, because actually that is then driving the financial bubbles.
Correct. Yeah. Well, you're right. That's a bit like what I was saying there, where this is a really bad to say, but I actually do say it to people, clients as well. We can almost tell when something is overinflated, not by any data or anything that's going on. If I have a load of people who start saying about something to me, who not, obviously, I wouldn't say don't know anything about, finance and markets, but it's not their day job. It's like if someone was in, if someone is, a recruiter or they're work in a factory and I start referencing things about what their job is, I'm probably not going to know much, am I? I might know the basics, how the industry works, but I'm not going to know the ins and outs and everything like that. It's a bit like when people come to us out of industry and they're all talking about the same thing, it's generally driven by greed and herd mentality because they've heard it in the news, they've heard it online, they've seen it on TikTok, their friends mentioned it. And that's generally the point where things have got very out of control. Like the gold example, the difference with gold is it is a good long-term asset. So at least with that one, but it's when you get things like the meme stocks and, really small crypto coins and people are saying, like, I want to do this, I'm going to do that. That's when it can be really detrimental because gold, you can probably buy at any point and eventually it will just carry on ticking up, like depending on what time frame that is. But if you do something that is rubbish, to put it bluntly, it might never come back. And that's where you can have it wiped out through greed and herd mentality.
Mm-hmm. You know what I was thinking? Like, I find it so fascinating that actually like greed and all this herd mentality is so embedded in us since like ancient times, because it actually helped us survive during those times when resources were scarce, for example, or there would be the winter season would come and whoever would like gather more stuff to make sure they have some provisions on the side would survive better, right, than others that were unprepared. And I find it fascinating that something which was reflected in our behavior such a long time ago still comes at surface even today in a much more sophisticated environment and using much more sophisticated instruments, but still we are driven by the kind of like the same forces like we were back in the days.
Yeah, it's a good analogy, isn't it? I'm pretty much linking everything to markets, but you're right. I guess it's across everything, isn't it? People have greed and it's not just related to financial markets.
Yeah. Going further into our discussion, I would like to link again some emotions to our financial behavior, and I would go to the reverse of the dopamine, and would like to explore the loss aversion, something which you also mentioned before, as it is linked to uncertainty and fear. And I am quite passionate about this subject and how behavior and how emotions can drive our decisions. And when we talk about loss, actually loss activates a part in our brain that is responsible for processing pain. That's why we have this loss aversion, and it's so powerful because it's actually painful.
Yeah.
And loss will always feel more powerful than an actual gain. And apparently, emotionally, it's 2 times more powerful.
Yeah.
How can we overcome a bit this loss aversion?
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, I did see some data on this as well that said basically the same as what you just said there. That loss of people are basically a lot more afraid of losing money emotionally than the gain. Like if you text someone, say you're down 20% or you're up 20%, the up 20 they'll almost just ignore. They're like, yeah, great. But the down is panic mode. So I think, it's a very interesting question. And I guess the best way for someone to almost get over it, I mean, I've probably said it throughout this, but it's that long-term mindset, because it's very hard, I'd say, to get over it without properly understanding and looking at what's going on. But if you're always, I mean, yeah, I don't know if there's any psychological answer or something that they can do, but just from a market's mindset, if you're always thinking long term, then it doesn't really matter, does it? It's only starts to occur when someone is putting in money or doing something with the assumption that they need it very soon, because that's when I guess it's really bad. Because then if you are, how that loss, that 20%, wow, what's happening? It's going to be 10 times worse if you need the money next week than if it's 15 years, right? So it's back to that long-term mindset. When you're investing, if you always have think this is for the next 5 years, this is for the next 10 years, this is for the next 15, then arguably it should be less than if you need it. I mean, that's probably my best answer on it. I don't know if you have something on, I know it's your kind of subject and you're interested in this stuff, but if you have something different from a mental mindset.
That's a good question, actually.
No, you didn't expect me to be answering the questions.
I didn't expect this. Well, from my point of view, which might be not necessarily coming from this market perspective, but more as a general side, is that we actually need to embrace in life both sides. There will always be the good and the bad. It's the duality of life, the dark and the light, and all these examples which we see also in the environment, in the universe, on the financial markets, in our personal life. So we need to learn to navigate both sides and accept that not everything will work out positively all the time.
I like that, to be fair. That's a good way of looking at it.
Okay. I got it.
Am I asking the questions now?
If you want.
No, we're good.
Speaking of this, I would like to play a little game, if you accept. I will give you a few statements which describe a certain behavior or mindset. And I would like you to label it like rational or irrational from financial and investment perspective.
Yeah.
And maybe give us a little context if you want.
So I need to give a reason as well. I can't just say rational or irrational.
I mean, as you wish.
Okay.
But on some, maybe you have some comments.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so let's play the little game. I check my portfolio every day.
That is probably irrational, because back to the whole point, it should be more of a long-term mindset, right? So checking it every day means you're getting way too worked up and emotional because it's going to be moving every day. So it has to be irrational. I'd say if you're, again, it depends who it is. If you're a standard investor, you're doing it for the long term, probably even once a month, once a quarter, it's probably a good time just to see what's going on. I'd say, once a day is very irrational.
Okay. Next one. I sold my winning stocks to lock in the gains, but held onto the losing ones, hoping they'd recover.
So selling the winning stocks is an interesting one because I don't think, I mean, it's probably rational to an extent because technically you're locking in. It depends again on the time frame, what's going on. Again, in the long term, it'd be irrational because you shouldn't be selling it just because they're up. But if they've done, like that example in gold, if it had done 400% as an example over a period, it'd probably be quite rational because you're like, I'm locking some gains and I'll shift it elsewhere. Hanging on to losing stocks is definitely irrational. And this is one of the ones that people get really emotional behind. And I get it all the time. I'm just going to wait until it recovers, right? But really, you should, if your stocks drop 50%, you should really say, where is my money best placed to grow? And just because a stock's dropped 50% or a portfolio doesn't necessarily mean it's ever going to recover. You could be invested in a startup that went bust. So you're going to wait for the rest of your life. Like, I know if it went bust, you'd have no value. But let's say something that is going to get worse, but you haven't kind of got out of. So that's definitely irrational. And that's a really good one because so many people do it. The amount of people that will say, I'm going to wait until it recovers, but it's not the right mindset. And honestly, it's probably the hardest one that I find to talk people out of because they won't listen to you. You can tell them that, but they'll just say, no, like, I'm going to wait. Like, I understand, but I'm going to wait. So that one is definitely irrational. The other one is probably irrational, but it could be rational in certain circumstances.
Okay, I like that. Very complex answer and professional. Next one is, I am young and fun, and I don't want to think about pension now. I will start saving later for this.
I can make this one very short. Irrational, pay yourself first. That's it. But to give you a bit more detail on it, it's like the whole compounding. A lot of people, again, is this the right time? Should I wait? All these kinds of things. I don't have enough money to start. I don't know the exact figures. I post about them all the time, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But very simply, if you start at 25 or you start at 55, even if you started at $500 at 25, you'd have to catch up for 60. It would be like the amount you'd have to contribute would be, most people would never be able to get near it. So it is irrational. And again, it's quite a common one because people either think they don't have enough money to start, it's too early because why bother? They might as well spend it on themselves. So it's back to that point. If you pay yourself first, you should, whether you're 20, 30, 50, you should be doing the same really. And it should all be proportional. So someone who earns, say you get out of college and you earn $1,000, and you're doing 10%, $1,000 a month, is very different to the guy earning $10,000 a month and they're doing 10%, right? So it should almost go up over time as your salary increases and you get more. So irrational.
Mm-hmm. What would you say to someone who is saying investment is just gambling?
Is this irrational or rational?
Yes.
Irrational, because it's not. It can be gambling if you do, like, as we said, just individual, no idea, putting all your money in one thing. And again, to be honest, yeah, people do say that. Like, it is one that's said a lot because, again, it's a lack of understanding. But it's not gambling when it's a structured portfolio, invests in different assets, sectors, markets, and it's very diversified. It is gambling if you are putting all your net worth into Tesla, as an example.
Mm-hmm. I don't need a financial advisor. I will just read and figure it out myself.
Well, I think obviously I'm going to say that's irrational.
I was expecting that.
So, look, obviously people can be very knowledgeable, and you can do, I'm not going to sit here and pretend you can do stuff, right? Because if you read and you learn, but then it's that whole point, isn't it? About, can you be consistent? Are you going to study it? How are you going to be disciplined, knowing that it's you doing it yourself? As in, are you, markets, how are you going to react to that? Because we have a lot of people actually who come to us after they've tried to do it themselves because they realize, one of these factors they can't do. And I'm just talking about markets here. I'm not talking about tax structuring. There's a whole other kind of realm that we haven't even entered. Most of what we've been talking about is market related. However, my actual job can be insurance, making sure people have life, critical illness. It can be estate planning. It can be setting up foundations. It can be structuring if they're moving back to the UK, to Portugal, whatever that might look like. So it's, we've kept it even just market related, they're the points, but it's obviously a lot broader than that. So I'd say obviously, depending on someone's wealth, it's definitely irrational. If the wealth is very low, then arguably if they've got a lot of knowledge, it could be rational. Someone who's like, on the very, very lower end, but generally irrational.
Mm-hmm. Next one is, I have 10K in my saving account with 0 to 0.2%. And on the other side, I have a debt on my credit card of 8K at a much higher rate, let's say 10%.
Yeah.
Is it rational or irrational to have the debt on the credit card at a higher interest rate, but on the other side to keep money in a saving account?
So it's irrational because it's 10%. There's two things you can do. This probably isn't that popular, but I actually don't think debt is bad. I think it's a great way for accumulating wealth for people if they know how to use it. However, credit card debt is bad. So in my opinion, there's two options with that. One, you have to pay it off, because obviously why have you, to say you're going to do over 10%, it's doable. It is doable, but like it's too high to be comfortable. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
With that. So you want to pay it off. So it's irrational. But the other option is if you then took out the debt from a bank structured over like 3 or 4 years, and it was at like 3%, 3.5%, 2%, then arguably that is also an option, because then you're borrowing the money at a low rate. And if you invest it or you do something else with it, you will likely outpace, and it's not a guarantee, but you will likely outpace that. So there's it's definitely irrational, but there's two ways you could go about it. And that's like the whole mortgage example. Do I pay down my mortgage or do I leave it? And that's, again, if someone's risky, not risky. I like debt. If it's locked in and structured, I think it can be a good tool. But it has to be locked in. It can't be a credit card at 10%.
Okay. Professional again. I have one. It's not necessarily investment related, but it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you do that. I bought something which I didn't need because the delivery was free if I bought for 50 euros.
Yeah. The delivery was free if you bought.
If you bought above a certain amount, let's say 50 or 100 euros.
I mean, it's definitely irrational because you're buying something you don't need because the delivery is free. So to be honest, I don't think I would do that. No. Like, as in, it's not something I've done. I probably have bought things in the past I don't need.
I think I've done
but it wouldn't be because of the delivery. It'd probably be because I looked at it and I was like, same with everyone. Like, oh, I like that. That's okay.
I think the girls will understand.
Is that more girl maths?
Maybe. Could be, yes.
I mean, it's not something I've done, but I mean, I could maybe see why you've done it.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you for playing with me this game. I think it was really fun.
Yeah.
And now to kind of like wrap it up, I would like to ask you, which is a belief which you had when you were younger around this idea of money and investments, and it kind of changed over time, and now that you're more experienced, you're still very young, I know. But
thank you.
How did your idea shift around money? And maybe also it could be like an advice for young people.
I mean, to be honest with you, I've been interested from quite a young age in like markets and financials. So as far as I can remember, I wouldn't say...
So at 6, when you went to school, you were like...
This is what I was going to say. Probably from like 15, 16.
Okay.
But I can't really remember what I thought before that. What I can say is what I did. So when I first started, very first, I think I bought Tesco stock or something like that. I bought a few shares, which if you obviously take that now, if I'd done that with all my wealth, it'd be an awful decision because I'd be investing in a couple of stocks, right? So I guess that would be from learning, because obviously when I started, I wasn't an advisor, was I? When I first went into a...
But did your parents maybe like guide you into this, or did you see them?
No, I think, to be honest, if I think back to it, I probably would have done what, say, someone who doesn't know much about the markets would do now. You kind of see stocks, you know, I want to invest in stocks. And then Tesco, right? I think it was Tesco and Tesla, which obviously Tesla was a great move, like to be fair. But Tesco obviously was just standard. And at the time it would have been Tesla because like Musk, electric cars, which actually wasn't a bad way of thinking. But I didn't know it was a good way of thinking. It was just more because I liked the car.
Hype,
I knew
right?
it, yeah. And Tesco would have been just because I knew what it was. So I was like, I'll just buy stocks in a supermarket in the UK. So a lot of people do that still because obviously, and that's what I did when I started. So I would say from that perspective, it's obviously now like knowing what I know, that's actually a really bad idea. How I did it, but obviously I was very young and that was the first thing I ever did. So that would be one. And then I guess coming into like this role, financial wise, it's more around the whole planning side. Like I used to be very into like stocks, do this, do that. But actually it's a lot more about emotions and discipline rather than just picking, because you can earn a lot of wealth over a long period of time by being very disciplined, taking emotions out of investing. Whereas before I was probably, again, more emotional. But then as I've gone through, I've obviously now if markets go down, I don't really have those emotions. I'm not panicking. I can't really, because obviously my clients. So I know, like, I not that I have to be, but I kind of understand it a lot. So I wouldn't panic. I wouldn't, you wouldn't see me be worried. If say a portfolio dropped 20% tomorrow and it was in a structured, I wouldn't be panicking. I'd just be like, this is cycles, what's happening. But a lot of people would be panicking, right? So it's more the actual knowledge of like stocks and its emotions and consistency is probably what's changed.
Okay, great.
Is that a good answer? Is that
amazing? Okay? Actually, all the answers were amazing.
Great.
Very professional.
I have to stay relatively professional, I guess. I can't be saying too much. You didn't get me onto the UK, so we're all good.
Okay, thank you for joining me today. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise.